In a drawer in a museum somewhere sits a tooth the size of a human hand. It is heavy, dense, the color of dark stone, its edges still faintly serrated after millions of years. For most of human history, nobody knew what it was. In medieval Europe, people dug these things out of the rock and believed they were the petrified tongues of dragons or the teeth of giant serpents turned to stone by saints. They wore them as charms against poison. They had no idea they were holding a fragment of the single most terrifying predator that has ever lived in the oceans of this world. The tooth belonged to the Megalodon. And for a long time, that tooth and tens of thousands of others like it was almost all we had. Because the Megalodon left us a maddening puzzle. It was a shark, and sharks are built of cartilage, not bone. So when a Megalodon died, its enormous body did not fossilize. It dissolved into the seabed and vanished. What remained were the teeth scattered across the ocean floors of the entire planet and a few rare fragments of vertebrae. From those scraps, scientists have spent over a century trying to reconstruct a monster, and recently using new techniques that can read the chemistry locked inside those ancient teeth, the chemical signatures, the isotopes, the molecular traces sealed in the enamel for millions of years. Researchers have finally begun to pull real answers out of the silence. What that hidden record revealed about how big the Megalodon truly was, how it lived, whether it was warm-blooded, and above all, why a creature that perfect simply vanished, has genuinely shocked the scientists who uncovered it. This is what the evidence actually shows. Before we get into it, hit that subscribe button. Every video here digs up the real origin of an animal you thought you knew. Let's begin. Before we can talk about the monster, we have to talk about how we even realized the teeth were teeth, because that story is itself one of the foundations of modern science. For centuries, those heavy triangular stones turning up in the rocks of Europe and the Mediterranean were called glossopetrae, or tongue stones. The prevailing belief going back to antiquity was that they were exactly what they looked like. Stones perhaps fallen from the sky during eclipses, or the petrified tongues of dragons and serpents. They were ground into powder and sold as a treatment for poison. Nobody connected them to living animals at all. Then, in 1666, fishermen off the coast of Italy hauled in an enormous shark, and its head was sent to a Danish anatomist named Nicholas Steno. Steno dissected it, and when he looked at the shark's teeth, he froze. They were the tongue stones, the same shape, the same serrations, the same structure, only fresh instead of fossilized. Steno made the leap that changed everything. The tongue stones were not stones at all. They were the teeth of sharks that had died long ago, buried in sediment and turned to rock over unimaginable spans of time. In making that single connection, Steno helped lay the foundation of paleontology itself, the radical idea that fossils are the remains of once living creatures, and that the rock beneath our feet is a record of deep time. The Megalodon, in a sense, helped give birth to the science that would one day reconstruct it. The monster's teeth were teaching us how to read the past before we even knew what animal had shed them. Now to the scale, because the scale is the thing nobody is ever quite prepared for. The Megalodon was the largest predatory shark that ever existed, and very probably the largest macropredator in the entire history of life on Earth. Its formal name is Otodus megalodon, and it ruled the oceans from around 23 million years ago until roughly 3.5 million years ago, a reign of nearly 20 million years. For that staggering span of time, it sat at the absolute top of the marine food web, with nothing above it and nothing capable of challenging it. How big was it? Because we have so little of the actual body, size estimates have been one of the great debates in paleontology, built up painstakingly from the teeth and the few preserved vertebrae. The most widely accepted estimates put the Megalodon at somewhere between 15 and 20 meters long. That is up to 65 feet, possibly more. Compare that to the great white shark, the largest predatory shark alive today, which reaches perhaps 6 meters. The Megalodon was up to 3 times that length, and far more massive in proportion, potentially weighing in the range of 50 tons or more. This was a shark the size of a large whale, with the hunting instincts and weaponry of the ocean's most refined predator. And the weaponry was the stuff of nightmares. The teeth that survive are up to about 7 inches long, the largest teeth of any shark known to science. They are broad, triangular, thick, and edged with fine serrations, like a steak knife built for flesh and bone. The Megalodon's jaws, reconstructed from those teeth, could have opened wide enough to swallow a human being whole with room to spare, and its bite force is estimated to have been among the most powerful of any animal that has ever lived, strong enough to crush the rib cage of a whale, because that is exactly what it ate. And here's the first place where the scientists were genuinely, deeply wrong for over a century. For most of the time we have known about the Megalodon, it was assumed to be, essentially, a giant great white shark. The resemblance of the teeth was so strong that scientists named it Carcharodon megalodon, placing it in Carcharodon, the very same genus as the great white. The popular image followed. The Megalodon was imagined as a great white, scaled up to monstrous proportions, the same stocky, torpedo-shaped body, just enormous. Every museum model, every illustration, every movie monster was built on that assumption. It was wrong. As researchers studied the teeth more carefully, looking at their structure, their serrations, and their evolutionary lineage, a different picture emerged. The Megalodon was not a giant great white at all. It belonged to a completely separate and now entirely extinct lineage of sharks, the otodontids, which is why its name was changed to Otodus megalodon. Its resemblance to the great white was a case of convergent evolution, 2 unrelated predators independently evolving similar teeth because they hunted in similar ways. The great white is not the Megalodon's descendant, nor its close relative. It actually descends from a different group, more closely related to mako sharks. For a century, we had the Megalodon's family tree fundamentally wrong, picturing it as the ancestor of the shark we know best, when in truth it was the last of its own separate dynasty, a lineage that has no living members at all. When the Megalodon died, an entire branch of the shark family tree died with it. That correction opened a second, even stranger question. One scientists are still arguing about today. If the Megalodon was not a giant great white, then what did it actually look like? This sounds like it should be simple. It is not. Remember, we have almost no body, just teeth and a handful of vertebrae. Every reconstruction of the Megalodon's shape has been an inference, and for decades that inference was simply great white but huge. Once that assumption collapsed, so did our confidence in the shape. Recent research, published as recently as the last couple of years, has challenged the stocky great white model entirely. By studying the proportions of the preserved vertebral column and comparing the Megalodon to a wide range of sharks, some scientists now argue the Megalodon may have had a longer, more slender, more elongated body than the bulky shape we always imagined, closer in proportion to a large lemon shark than a scaled-up great white. Some of these newer analyses even push the possible length upward, suggesting the animal may have been longer than the classic estimates, perhaps approaching 24 meters in the largest individuals. It is a genuinely humbling situation. The most famous extinct predator in popular culture, the star of films and documentaries, and we are still fundamentally unsure of its shape, because the animal itself, its cartilage body, simply did not survive. Everything you have ever seen depicting the Megalodon's body is an educated guess, and the guesses are still changing. The teeth are real. The bite marks on whalebone are real. But the monster's true silhouette remains, even now, partly a mystery dissolving in the deep. What we do know with surprising confidence is what the Megalodon ate, and we know it because of one of the most remarkable things hidden in the fossils. The fossil record preserves not just Megalodon teeth, but the bones of its victims. Scientists have found the fossilized bones of ancient whales bearing the unmistakable marks of Megalodon teeth, deep gouges, and punctures scored into the skeletons, sometimes with the tip of a broken Megalodon tooth still embedded in the wound. From this brutal evidence, a picture emerges of a predator that hunted the largest animals in its world. The Megalodon preyed on whales, on dolphins, on seals, on sea turtles, on whatever large marine life it could catch. It was an apex predator that fed on other giants. And here is where the modern science gets genuinely astonishing, because researchers have learned to read the chemical record locked inside the teeth themselves. Tooth enamel preserves trace chemistry, isotopes of elements like zinc and nitrogen that reflect what an animal ate during its life. By analyzing these chemical signatures in Megalodon teeth and comparing them to other ancient and modern marine animals, scientists were able to calculate the Megalodon's position in the food web. The result was striking. The Megalodon sat at one of the highest trophic levels ever measured in a marine predator, higher than the great white, higher than nearly anything in the ocean today. The chemistry, sealed in the teeth for millions of years, confirmed what the bite-marked whale bones suggested. This was a hyperpredator at the very summit of its ecosystem, in a class almost by itself. That chemical record, the isotopes preserved in the enamel, is, in a real sense, a molecular message left behind by an animal that has been gone for millions of years. We cannot read the Megalodon's genome. Its DNA is long gone. But we can read the chemistry of its teeth, and that chemistry has been telling scientists things about how this creature lived that no one could have guessed from the shape of a tooth alone. And the chemistry revealed something else, something that genuinely surprised the researchers who found it. The Megalodon may have been warm-blooded. Most fish, including most sharks, are cold-blooded. Their body temperature matches the water around them. But a small elite group of modern sharks, including the great white, have evolved a partial warm-bloodedness, the ability to keep parts of their body significantly warmer than the surrounding ocean. This gives them a powerful advantage. Warmer muscles mean faster swimming, faster digestion, the ability to hunt in colder, richer waters. It is one of the secrets of the great white's success. When scientists analyzed the isotopic chemistry of Megalodon teeth, specifically the way certain isotopes lock in depending on the temperature at which the tooth mineral formed, they found evidence that the Megalodon, too, was warm-blooded. Its body temperature appears to have been elevated several degrees above the surrounding seawater. This was a warm-bodied, high-performance super predator. Its enormous bulk kept heated like an engine, allowing it to range across wide stretches of ocean and hunt with terrible efficiency. But that same discovery carried a dark and unexpected twist, because being warm-blooded at that colossal size came at a tremendous cost. Keeping a 50-ton body warmer than the ocean requires an enormous, relentless intake of food. The Megalodon was a furnace that had to be fed constantly, an apex predator whose very metabolism demanded a steady supply of large, fatty prey like whales. And that dependency, it turns out, may have been the seed of its destruction. The thing that made the Megalodon so powerful, its warm, fast, hungry body, may also have been the vulnerability that doomed it when the world began to change. Because the Megalodon did vanish around 3.5 million years ago, and the question of why has haunted science for decades. How does the most powerful predator the oceans have ever known simply disappear? The evidence now points not to a single cause, but to a convergence of catastrophes, all striking the Megalodon at its one weak point, its enormous appetite. The first blow was the climate. Toward the end of the Megalodon's reign, the Earth was cooling and entering a period of dramatic change. The oceans shifted, Sea levels fell, and the warm, shallow coastal seas where the megalodon likely birthed and raised its young, its nurseries, began to disappear. The warm waters its great warm body was suited to were shrinking. A creature that vast, that specialized, that dependent on stable, rich hunting grounds, found its world contracting around it. The second blow was its food. The populations of whales and other marine mammals the megalodon depended on were changing, some declining, others migrating into colder polar waters that may have been beyond the megalodon's comfortable reach, others evolving into faster, more elusive forms. The megalodon's furnace needed feeding, and the fuel was becoming scarcer and harder to catch. And the third blow may have been the most poetic and the most brutal. A new predator had appeared in the oceans, the great white shark, smaller, faster, more agile, and crucially, more efficient. The great white did not need to eat on the megalodon's titanic scale. It could thrive on less. And the isotopic evidence, that same chemistry read from the teeth, suggests that the great white and the megalodon were competing for the very same prey. The nimble newcomer was eating the giant's lunch. In a world of shrinking food and cooling seas, the smaller, hungrier-for-less great white may have simply outcompeted the largest predator that ever lived. The megalodon was too big, too warm, too hungry to survive a world that no longer had enough to feed it. And the descendants of its smaller rival are still here today, still patrolling our coastlines, the survivors of a competition the giant lost. There is one more thing the fossils revealed, and it adds a strange, almost tender dimension to the monster. Scientists have identified what appear to be Megalodon nurseries, specific shallow, warm coastal regions where the fossil teeth are overwhelmingly small, belonging to juveniles. This tells us that the megalodon, like many sharks today, used protected nursery grounds to raise its young, places where baby megalodons, already enormous by our standards, perhaps 2 meters long at birth, could grow in relative safety before venturing into the open ocean. And like its modern relatives, the megalodon likely gave birth to live young, with the largest, strongest pups very possibly consuming their own siblings inside the womb. A brutal head start that produced a small number of huge, powerful newborns. Picture it, a coastal shallows millions of years ago, warm and bright, full of young megalodons the size of great white sharks, growing, hunting, learning in the nursery their mothers had returned to. It is a glimpse of the megalodon not as a movie monster, but as a living animal, with a life cycle, with vulnerable young, with a place in a vanished world. And it is precisely those warm coastal nurseries that the cooling, falling seas would later take away, closing the cradle of the species at the same moment its food was vanishing and its rival was rising. So pull it all together, and the real story of the Megalodon is far stranger and far more tragic than the monster of our imagination. The Megalodon was the largest predatory shark that ever lived, up to 65 feet long, armed with 7-inch serrated teeth and a bite that could crush a whale, and it ruled the oceans as the planet's supreme predator for nearly 20 million years. We know it almost entirely from its teeth, because its cartilage body left no skeleton, the same teeth that centuries ago taught humanity how to read fossils at all. Those teeth revealed that we had it wrong for 100 years. The Megalodon was not a giant great white, but the last of its own vanished dynasty, and its true body shape is still being argued over today. The chemistry locked inside the enamel showed it fed at the very top of the food web and ran a warm, heated body on a colossal scale. And that warm-blooded power was its hidden flaw. When the world cooled, when the seas fell and its nurseries vanished, when its prey grew scarce and migrated into cold waters, and when a smaller, faster, hungrier-for-less rival, the great white shark, rose to compete for the same food, the largest predator in the history of the oceans, could not feed its enormous warm body, and it died out forever. What does this mean for how we see the Megalodon? 3.5 million years after the last one disappeared. It means the monster was never really a monster. It was a masterpiece of evolution that grew so large, so powerful, and so specialized that it became fragile, a giant perfectly adapted to a world that did not last. The Megalodon is a lesson written in tooth enamel and whalebone. That being the biggest and the most powerful is not the same as being the most enduring. The great white, the smaller rival that outlived it, still swims in our oceans today. The Megalodon, the largest of them all, exists now only as those heavy hand-sized teeth scattered across the seabeds of the world, waiting to be found. The petrified remains of a king that ruled for 20 million years and then was undone by a changing planet and a smaller, cleverer competitor. The next time you see one of those teeth in a museum case, in a photograph, in someone's hand, understand what you are looking at. Not a dragon's tongue, not a movie villain. The single most powerful predator the oceans ever produced, brought down not by any greater monster, but by a world that simply changed faster than even it could. The Megalodon ruled longer than humans have existed many times over, and it's still lost. That is the real shock the evidence revealed, not how fearsome the Megalodon was, but how even perfection at that scale was not enough to last forever. If you found this story remarkable, consider subscribing. There are more origins to uncover, and the DNA is only beginning to tell us what it knows.